Well, Shane, I think it was April last time we checked in with one another, and it was for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. And so back then, you were joining a franchise already in place with a few films already under its belt. And now here we are 4 months later, and you're joining a franchise with a few films under its belt. So, how do you feel about being stereotyped? No, that's not what I'm going to ask you. No, what I do remember from Ghostbusters is you had a really great story about how you became a part of that project. I'm kind of hoping you have a really good one for Deadpool and Wolverine as well.
I have an even better one. I got the real luck of the lottery in life meeting Blake Lively. I met her directing a music video that she was directing for Taylor Swift. It was her first time directing, and a producing partner, a friend of mine, Rebecca Skinner, had brought her in, and I work with like Damien Chazelle with her and Terrence Malick with her. She does a commercial production company, and she was like, Blake is doing this video. She doesn't have an editor, and she's not directed something before, and I just think you'd be a great fit with her. She was so wonderful and so talented, and we quickly became friends and collaborators and worked really in tandem. And the way that her and Ryan work is like they're just a part of everything that they do. They constantly talk to each other in the room. They constantly check in on each other. If there's like an ABC of like a choice that you'd make, it's like a text chain between us, and Ryan's picking A and I'm picking this. And so by proximity, I got to know him, and we just kept in communication. We talked with him a bit, my wife and I, after that, and became friendly. And then Ryan announced Deadpool, and I remember talking to my wife, and I was like, this is like an insane shot in the dark, and it's probably something that I'm never going to get to, but maybe I'm just going to reach out to Blake and see if there's any position that I could hold on this film, and it would be, such an honor. And it went quiet for a little while, and little did I know that Blake was like hard selling me on Shawn Levy and hard selling me on Ryan, and I got sort of pushed through the channels by them. And I remember Ryan texting me. I had started making a playlist one day, like for the movie. I just started manifesting it, like this is going to happen or it's not going to happen. So I started building my own playlist of a well that I would pull from. And in the middle of building that playlist, I get my first ever text from Ryan about this film. And I just see a text that says, I'm pitching you to Marvel in 30 minutes. What's your schedule on Ghostbusters? And it was just like such an outrageous scenario that I never thought would land. And I was always pinching myself throughout the process. And it was sort of like information would trickle in like daily. And then I remember I talked with Dean and Wendy Jacobson, the producer. I had a conversation with Shawn, who was sort of bewildered by the situation and also trusting of the creative collaborators that he's known to be friendly with and love and admire. And so I remember being in a hotel in London on Ghostbusters, and I got a text from him that said, welcome aboard, with a Deadpool emoji, doing something, and everything just changed from there.
All right, Dean, I know I don't have to really ask you about, how you got this gig. This is, I think, your third film in a row now with Shawn and Ryan. Of course, you go way back with Shawn, but I think, let's see, The Free Guy and then The Atom Project. Now here we are, Deadpool and Wolverine. So I won't ask you how you got the gig, but I will ask you about when are you brought into the process? In that little tight-knit collaborative community of the three of you, when do they bring you in and what do they ask you about? What kind of info do they want back from their editor?
So the on this one was unique because they did, and it was because it was so big, and also our timeline was going to be so compressed. Shawn wanted me out early, so I flew to London about 3 weeks ahead of time to sit in on all the complexity meetings, sit in on all the stunt viz stuff, look at all the stunt viz, look at all the previs, look at all the storyboards, cut all of that stuff, and work with George Cottle, our second unit director, and our stunt coordinator to kind of get everything perfect. And so that's what I did. I came in a little early, and sat with all those guys. Obviously, I've known most of the crew, all the big key crew out there. I had worked with many times before, so a bit of a well-oiled machine in that way. But yeah, having me out there and going through all that material, recutting stuff, saying, "Oh, we should get this. We should get this. Why are we doing this?" That all kind of helped inform and kind of get a bit of ahead of just planning the shoot and the schedule of the shoot.
Well, Dean, it's not unusual for you to teach me something. I've never heard the term complexity meeting before. Is that an industry term, or is that a marker expression?
It's actually a Josh McLaughlin, aka Zulu, he's affectionately known. It's one of his. He's the first AD and executive producer. He has these complexity meetings where we literally break down by shot what we're going to shoot that day. What complexities go into that shot, whether it's stunts, rigging, special effects, but all the way down to like hair and makeup and wardrobe and props. And so we literally, on every single moment of every single day, everyone has an idea of like, these are the shots we're getting today. This is what we need in every single one of those shots. And here's everybody's responsibility. And with big set pieces and big action scenes like that, it's very imperative. And it's literally like watching paint dry, but with having someone slice you with a knife 6,000 times. It's the most ridiculous, horrible meetings you'll ever want to be in, but they are absolutely vital, and everyone understands why they are that way.
Yeah.
But it is why Shawn can move so quickly on set. It's why Ryan doesn't ever have to be frustrated as not only a producer, actor, writer, and star. He can, everything is to maximize the day so that Ryan doesn't have to stay in that suit or the makeup any longer than he has to.
If you've worked in the Deadpool franchise prior to this,
no.
Do you invest much time?
Or the Marvel Universe, yeah.
Oh, it's a good point. First time out for Marvel.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And Disney, yeah.
Wow, I'm learning so much about you today, Dean.
Right? I know.
Do you invest much time in watching the earlier films or getting more backstory on the characters that even go beyond Deadpool and Wolverine? And whether you do or not, do Shawn and Ryan give you anything more than the script to go on? Is there anything more that they can provide you to be more informed editors going into the project?
Other than both of us reading the script with all the code names for all the cameos and stuff that were happening that we didn't know about, and thinking that, because a lot of the code names were 11 and a lot of the names, Jonathan Byers, Stranger Things. And I'm like, is Shawn trying to meld the MCU and Stranger Things somehow? Like, why is Millie saying this dialogue? This is not something she would say. And once we found out what the actual characters were, it made it much easier. I'll speak for myself and say the only research I did was I watched a lot, probably 89% of the Marvel movies that would potentially relate to this, and one episode of Loki that Shawn wanted me to watch just for the void environment that we were going to be in. So just so I had a visual representation of what it was going to end up being.
I watched the first and second Deadpool quite a bit, and I specifically watched and listened to the commentaries, every commentary, to glean some other insight into even anything that was like something that wasn't achieved that they were looking for in those first films, or something that had hit the cutting room floor, and just get a little bit more of a window into the writing process. And then I watched like some Buster Keaton films, and I watched like 80s movies. And I thought it would be more interesting to come into it. I've seen Marvel movies and I like Marvel movies, but I thought it would be more interesting to try to come at this film from a non-Marvel way, and to sort of operate from that lens versus, really, really understanding the world and the rules within it.
So what was it about the 80s movies? You know, I've heard Ryan talk about, I think he mentioned 48 Hours as being one of the movies he referenced as like this is a kind of, it's a buddy movie with a straight man
Yeah.
and a somewhat straighter man. Did he talk to you about 48 Hours or other movies like that?
48 Hours,
Trains,
Planes, Trains, and
Automobiles,
Automobiles was a big one. I
Midnight
watched
Run, Sean would reference.
Midnight Run. Yep. I watched Lethal Weapon because I remember like when I read the script and even thought of the idea, I was like, you have all these great buddy movies, right? And all of them have that really great tension between two characters who you know are going to sort of come out as buddies in the end, but are just fighting the whole way through, and that's what creates the great comedy. But for the first time, you would be able to have these guys shoot each other and stab each other in ways like if Danny Glover stabbed Mel Gibson in the rib cage, it would have been a totally different movie. And you had the chance to do that with this. So I wanted to learn from those and then just see like, you know, how do we take that tone and then add this like hyper violent element to it? And, you know, I thought that was an interesting.
How did you guys divide? I mean, this is a lot of work to do this movie. How did you guys divide and conquer?
It's a good question. It's actually a question that one of my assistants texted me. He's like, I saw it. It was amazing. But how did you navigate all that stuff? And this kind of goes back to where me and Shane had our initial conversation is like, how do you like to work? How do you, how do you run your cutting room? How, all that kind of stuff. And it was, we couldn't be more in sync in the ways that we actually operate as editors, which is, we need to create a safe space that we can fail and succeed all at once. No idea is bad. Every idea we should try. And so it was really like as the material came in, it's like, oh, I'm still banging away on this one. Do you mind grabbing that? And it was kind of one of those things. The only thing, and again, it was that Shane had come to me was, and I'll let him speak to as the why. But there was one part in the movie where we reveal all of our legacy heroes in the hero's hideout after the big van fight, and Shane came to me with a very passionate kind of asked to do that scene if I would mind if he took that, and I was like, absolutely, go ahead and take it. Like I have the great thing about me and Shane is I think we don't have egos, and I think we both understood like that's not how you create a safe space. If there's an ego in the room, that you're unsafe, right? Like you turn into this thing. And so having Shawn and Ryan, who are also just so welcoming and open to collaboration and experimentation, that's what yields obviously always the best work. So it was always that safe haven for us, and 100% super supportive of letting him take that because it hit him when he read the script in a way that he wanted to take a stab at.
Yeah, and Marker and I had specific scenes that we may have, like I think when you're in the assembly phase of a scene, you have more ownership of some of the ideas that went into it initially. But there's not a scene in this movie that didn't go untouched and unpassed between the two of us at total free will, with all the support from each other of like, yes, do that thing and check it out, and then we would just check each other for if it was better, and that was always the case. It was like, we in those initial conversations, I was very vocal about it, and Dean as well, that like the goal was to make the best movie with the best people. That was it. Whatever those ideas came from, whether it was us, whether it was an assistant, whether it was someone on set, like whatever the best idea was, won. And it truly is a film that encapsulates the concepts and the creative brains of everyone surrounding it. And that's what makes Shawn an incredible director, and Ryan an incredible producer and an actor and writer, is their ability to listen to the trusted people around them and pick from them the things that inspired them, and their enthusiasm around a great idea was really great. So that's kind of how those things worked out. I mean, and similar, Dean I had started building the sequence around Evans coming in, and I remember Dean was like, fuck, you're lucky, like that looks like so much fun, and I'd be like, dude, just take this chunk and go, like this is both of our dream. We're living in our dream right now, and we should both be so like hitting the things we want to do. And so for Dean to take a monster sequence like that and be like, dude, run with it. And it was really cool.
Well, Shane, what is it about that sequence or scene that made you want to go to Dean and go, listen, I'd really enjoy digging into this. Is it okay if I take this one?
You know, I'm relatively new to feature editing, and my partner at my commercial company is an editor named Kirk Baxter. And he always expressed to me like how his favorite sequences to cut are, especially in like Mindhunter, when you get 5 or 6 people in a room and it would just be this like, you know, the action was the dialogue and you're moving all around and it's all about, you know, placement and the repetition of faces and eyes checking this. And I just recognized that one of the things that I really wanted to cross a hurdle for was just editing a big dialogue driven sequence. Action is fun and great and I love it. But there was, you know, Dean had cut these like really powerful moments in the film. And I was like, that just seemed like one that would be, the cameos aside, it was like, I feel like Deadpool's just going to rip this room apart. And it seems like a lot of fun. And I feel like I loved all the bits in the script of Gambit, you know, everything he would say Deadpool wouldn't understand. And I was like, there's so much opportunity here for comedy. And it just felt like that was a space that I wanted to take a shot at for myself. And that's what was so great. I don't know if I fully expressed that to Dean, but like, that's what was so great about our partnership, was that he just recognized there was something in there that I wanted to experience as an artist, and he was supportive of it.
To be able to cut performance is every editor's number one goal and mission, right? Is to get the best performance out there. The only way to do that is when you're in a room of 5 or 6 people and you have to bounce it, and it's this ballet of timing, right, that you have to do to sustain, you know, 6 pages of dialogue and keep it interesting, but also service the plot and the story. And so obviously that was definitely a monster part of the script, having, you know, introductions to those characters, but what was done in there was the tee up to the third act. And so, you know, it was a very important piece of the film, because that's the slingshot into the third act. And so, to be able, the respect that I had that he wanted to take on a very, very critical part of the film, I'm 100% going to support that. And you know, that's just kind of how I like to work. And again, it's no ego, right? Like for me, I want to help the next generation. I want to help whoever I can. But at the same time, I learned more from Shane than I probably ever taught him. And I'm sure he would disagree, but at the same time, like this was the relationship that we had, and it all just happened so quickly and organically. Like, you know, we're talking like lifelong relationships that we've established in this very short amount of time. And it's just because we were thrown into this impossible scenario and had to become family to get through it.
As fate would have it, you brought up Planes, Trains, and Automobiles as a reference. It was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles editor Paul Hirsch who once said to me, intercutting is an editor's best friend, meaning, hey, it's a way out of things. It's a way to jump around when you really, you know, you kind of get stuck. Even though this is a multiverse movie, there is only one storyline from beginning to end, and Deadpool is in just about every scene. So you really can't intercut to anything else. So like in a situation like that, do you feel that restriction, or is this the kind of movie with, well, we can just do anything at any time? It's Deadpool. We can just go nuts at any moment.
I think intercutting happened more contained within sequences. I mean, Dean was throwing together the fight at Cassandra's at first, and you know, those were sort of like going into Wolverine's mindscape with Cassandra, and the fight vignettes that are happening outside were these sort of like self-contained units. And then we started to go like, well, what if we're going in and we're still going back out to that fight, and we're inside and we're out? And so we would intercut in places like that, or with the search for Wolverine that maybe didn't exist, but they were far and few places because the script was not really moving with multiple storylines, like you said. So I think the intercutting became about like, how do we add a freshness to this sequence or start to move around it in a way that's unexpected? rather than saving ourselves from a dialogue.
And the answer to the question of can we just go crazy? The answer is yes, because this movie can absorb so much stuff because it is Deadpool. He comments on everything. He's the first one to poke holes in all of it. But there is a threshold for sure, because too much is just too much, and then you start to get fatigue in an audience, and so it's the balance of pace and all that stuff, and where you break the fourth wall, and that's where Ryan is exceptional with, like, really targeting those moments so that when he does it, it means something. We would always say, like, let's break the fourth wall here, and he would pretty much do it in every scene just to have it, because you never know where we're going to place it. And so it was a very big restraint move on him to go, no, I don't want to do it there. I don't want to do it there. Like, or meta jokes, like, commenting, on stuff that's actually happening in the real world, very specific, and didn't want to go too, on the nose with some of the stuff all the time, because then the times then when you do it all the time, it becomes unspecial. And so that balance was definitely something that, we were all learning at the same time. And Ryan really, from the past two movies, had a very keen sense of, and all the previews that he's done and just the experience he's had with this character, he really knew where to do those punch-ins and punch-ups, and when to kind of be restrained and let it go.
In superhero movies or in science fiction movies, a lot of times you're dealing with characters that are wearing masks. And that is certainly true of Deadpool. And the beauty of that is that you can change what they're saying pretty much whenever you want throughout the post process. But that also means that, like a lot of things in filmmaking, like when you get more opportunity to do something, you will find a way to fill that opportunity with even more work. Like if they give you more time to work on the film, you're going to work right. It's not like same thing, money, time, whatever. So how did that process work with Ryan, that, okay, we can change what he's saying all the way right up until the film's just about ready to come out?
And we did. I mean, we definitely did. We were on the final mix stage, and he was recording some new jokes for certain things. I will say, though, and Shane has mentioned this as well, we also wanted to be very respectful of what we shot on the day, because what we shot on the day was him ad-libbing as well. And the stuff that he did on the day was really, really funny.
Yeah. And it was more instinctual. It was more instinctual, right?
Exactly.
It was based in sort of his feelings in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that he had the best. Am I wrong on this, Dean? He had the best audio recording on this film inside the mask than he had in previous films. So I think the ability to use his production audio was like a new thing for him. Like there was so much clarity in it, and I think it was a struggle for the first few films. So I'd say there's a good 70% that feels like it's his performance in there.
Yep. Because when you're in the suit, when he's in that suit, it's like a light switch. Like something just triggers in him, and he becomes this whole other person. And it's pretty crazy how fast he can turn it on and off. And so, and he can do it in an ADR booth as well, or just sitting in the cutting room with his phone and a little mic attached to it. Like that, a lot of that stuff happened there. The good thing with doing with the mask, and I will say this is a huge benefit, but again, a lot of work, is we would try 50 different things for every single line and every single joke. And we would all either always go back to production, or it's like, because we just couldn't beat it, right? But we had the ability to try. Mm-hmm. And that was where, that 30% that we used, that we changed, made the film 30% better. So that we normally wouldn't have had.
The tracking of it would be interesting too, because something would be recorded that was new that we'd scrap. But then if you had to track all the lines, because then we'd be throwing those pieces elsewhere to enhance something else. So it became like, as much as there is dailies, it became as much Ryan VO. And that was a very important thing to shop around and, and trickle this little thing in here that glues that thought together. And, So it was like, it was an insane amount of work. But my God, like watching that man's brain operate with a microphone in front of him is one of the most exciting things I think any of us have been a part of. The amount of burst out laughter in those rooms is just infectious,
Yeah, I mean, ruining performances because there's something he would just say. He would just do something that you just were not expecting, and it would slap you in the face, and you just couldn't stop laughing. And he'd be like, "Okay, go out. Like I need to record it."
And you couldn't believe you're like kids getting to put it in a movie. You're like, that thing that made us laugh like that, we get to try and put into a movie. Like it's a very rare situation.
For avid viewers that you have, right? And for just being an avid user, we had more audio tracks for ADR than any other thing we had.
How many?
We had I think we had like 4 or 5 ADR tracks that we were using, and I had like 2 production tracks. And it was because he would just stack so much all the time. It was, I mean, listen, we would get, we have this on running joke. We're on group text with the 4 of us, right? Me, Shawn, Ryan, and Shane. And they're on the East Coast, we're on the West Coast. And without fail, every single morning around 4 o'clock, 4:30, Ryan had just been finished in the gym, and we would have text messages of 20 alts for 3 different jokes. And then the next text going, never mind, don't use any of those, try this one. But we would have to try them all and send it to him. And so the audition process was massive because you try them, you send them the clip, you try them, send them all 20 times, and then everyone's got to weigh in on it. And then we decide on which one's which. And it was so like, I'd make this joke, like, I never want to get another text from Ryan Reynolds at 3 o'clock in the morning again. And now that I don't have them, I really miss them.
I remember getting a text. We got a text from our dialogue editor, Ryan Cole, after the world premiere. And I I came to it a little late, and I was like, I was totally expecting that Ryan had seen the world premiere and was like, got to change this and this and this. Like even after it's locked, it's just, he pushes it all the way to the end, and bless him for it, because he delivers and always aims to maximize everything that he's doing.
Well, I always ask editors about the challenge of organizing all this material. I mean, in a regular, I'll just call it regular movie, that's a huge task in and of itself. When you're dealing with all these alternates and all these different versions, how do you manage all that stuff, especially the fact that it doesn't necessarily live in any one scene? You could take one of his quips and put it almost anywhere.
Jennifer Stelma there's 2 words. That's her. She is hands down the greatest assistant I've ever worked with. We moved her up from a first to associate editor on the film because the workhorse that she is, the beast that she is, in managing all of that stuff. She is single-handedly the one that got Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine into worldwide theaters. She is a monster. The attention to detail, her organization of the project, and the ease at which she made it for us to be able to access anything at any point, was the reason that not only we could move so quickly, but be able to have the ability to recall anything we needed to whenever it was asked of us.
And not to mention the coasts in which she worked on, right? She was moving from London to New York to LA and just setting us up everywhere ahead of us always. Cared about the film as much as anybody else who was on it.
We had 6 different nexuses all over the world, because Marvel does these crazy redundancy backups. I mean, we had one in Nevada, for the love of God. And just managing all of that. I mean, just the amount of work and the hours that she put in every day to, like I said, manage all the stuff, make sure everything's online, that every different nexus was sunk properly. It was a monumental task. I mean, you could do a whole 2 hours of her explaining the workflow of trying to manage all this media with on 3 different coasts.
This thing could have absolutely fallen apart in the wrong hands,
like it would be so good because she's done it all from the Russo brothers to, she's worked with all the biggest
Yeah,
editors.
Chazelle
Like
and
she
everyone.
knows, she knows everybody, and honestly, she's the best. But the knowledge that she has and the her ability to uh, uh, be a chameleon and just adapt to any situation, because everyone has their own unique way of doing things. Definitely Marvel does for sure. And the way that we can navigate that to where it did not impact us at all is a miracle. It was legit a miracle.
Yeah.
Because I love to work a certain way and I need to work a certain way with the people that I work for and with. And she understood that, she knew it, and not only rose to the occasion, she just killed it.
Mhm.
There wasn't a single day where I was down or was like, I don't know where that, like there
Yeah,
was
yeah,
none of that.
yeah.
And you can't have that because it just creates too much insecurity in some of the partners that we have on the thing. Rightly so. And so the task that she had was just, you should 100% do a whole thing on her.
Mhm.
For
Done.
sure.
Well, I'd be remiss if
Yeah.
I didn't ask, what is that certain way you like to work? How do you describe that?
Everything has to be immediate access.
Yeah.
Like I need to know not only where everything is at every single point, but be able to recall it as quickly as possible. I need the systems to be running at the most optimal levels. I need to have the best and biggest equipment out there. I love pushing the boundaries. I love um, uh, uh, emailing your tech guys all the time, going, "Where's this? I need this. I need this. I need this. This sucks." Um, but having the most stable version of Avid, but also if there's a new one out there that we need to test, can we do that? And so it all just has to be, like when I hit play, there can be zero latency. It all has to move faster than, because I move faster than the machine, and Shawn wants me to move faster than the machine. So does Shane, and we all have to be able to jump on each other's equipment. So it's also managing all the settings and everything else, like because Shane works on a Wacom tablet with a pen, where I incorporate a mouse that I have programmed with edit functions on. And so it's being able to navigate all that stuff and have everything at the ready, and there just can't be any downtime, right? There's no, when they're in the room, it's we need to be going 1,000 miles an hour.
Well, and in outside of the technical side of it too, what Jen really understood, from her experience with Dean, as fast as Dean is as an editor, but especially on this one with the expectations of guys like Ryan and Shawn who are at their max on a very compressed schedule moving, she just understood that like it was all about speed and efficiency. And she never, I'm sure it drove her mad at times, but really it was about, we need to access things ASAP. So when that thing gets to you, you're on it. Like there was never a time where there was a lag or her behind the ball in that, because time was money with these guys, and there was just no room for us to be slow ever. I mean, we work so many weekends, we work so many hours. There's not a single wasted hour or weekend day that I can even think of on this job. Everything was about massaging sequences, about moving them forward, about propelling them, about trying new things. There were, like you said at the beginning, there were so many ideas in here it took all of our brain power and our speed.
Yeah, just even like Ryan going, "Hey, can we try this song?" Well, it's not in the Avid, and literally in 20 seconds, she's like, "Stop a project." Like it's that kind of stuff where it's the instantaneous. She understood that everything had to be as fast as lightning, right? And because that's just how fast we're moving in here.
Yeah.
And again, having just like, even from dailies, like how do we set up where she automatically downloads dailies when they're done from the thing at 4:00 in the morning, and then, okay, this is done. So I need assistance in at 6 to get everything ready so that Marker and Shane have everything ready to go at 9 a.m. Like it's all that stuff that it's the unsung hero stuff, right? Like without our assistance, we're nothing. Like we're nothing. Like we just can't do what we do without them. And when you have someone like the people that we had on this show, that led from Jen, um, this is why we're here. This is why we're able to do this kind of stuff and look as good as that they made us look. Like we owe everything to them.
It's why the film is as good as it is, because we exhausted as many
100%.
ideas as we possibly could. That's what it required.
So earlier I asked you guys about going back and watching the earlier films and getting context. One of my favorite quips in the film, amongst many, is Deadpool says to another character, "Hey, that's a lot of exposition for a threequel." But the
That's a
balance,
shit ton of exposition for us.
I wasn't going to put it that way, but yeah, balancing that in the cutting room. How much, did you find that you were trying to weigh out? Well, we got to give some context to who these characters are that we may be meeting, or what the story of what is Deadpool's backstory there. It's possible that there's people seeing this movie that without knowing the other two. Did you debate or discuss that at all in the cutting room, or did you just say, you know what, the kind of movie this is, it's just going to be nonstop, it's going to be laughs, it's going to be fun action, and that's it?
We did a lot of testing, and the audience has told us what they were missing and what they needed, and we adjusted. And that's true for any project that you're on. The more you can test, and I'm a huge believer in testing, and so is Shawn, and so is Ryan. The more people that we can get eyes on it, because, like you said, not everyone knows all this stuff that we've, Deadpool hasn't been seen by every single person in the world. So, how do you, if you get those people in, how do you have it be an experience where they're not feeling like they need to go rewatch everything? And that was, it's not a hard task, but it's a task that you need to be open for suggestion. You need to be open for, the ability to pivot and move and change things. And can you do that successfully?
It would also birth like interesting editorial ideas that we could challenge ourselves with sort of something like moving from the bone fight into Happy's office. It's like, by testing it, we're like, man, there's this jump happening and we're not quite sure. How do we do this? How do we catch people up in a very like Deadpoolian kind of way? And so we would craft something that's
without it being a stupid Chiron, right?
Yeah.
Or
relying on VO all the time.
Exactly.
Or relying on VO. There's so much dialogue that, like, how do we do things visually the match cuts were always so cool in the first few Deadpool films, and methodical and thought through, and I, the interesting thing is that not all of those are thought through. They sort of come from the obstacles of where the story puts you, and you can have a great script, you can have all that, but until you start putting it together, you go, how do we get from A to B right now? And how do we design something that not only catches our audience up, but does it in such a stylized way that it tells you, like, man, this film is full of ideas. It's going to surprise you. It's going to take turns, and then the audience doesn't know where they're going, and it's thrilling.
There was a perfect example that Shane gave, because it was a nod, him restudying the Deadpools, and I've memorized them anyway in my head, but the first two, because I'm just such a super fan anyway. But the fact that Shane, that whole sequence of reversing back after he meets Happy, right, and back and going and where he gets into, meets Paradox and all that stuff, and then we reverse back to the desecration of the Sacred Corpse. That whole thing, that was not scripted that way. It wasn't scripted as a rewind. Shane took that from Deadpool 1. And it's like, we should do this. Like, we should reintroduce, like, this was a cool way that they did in 1. We should do it here as well. And it's like, of course, that's exactly what we should do. And so that's, and using Cable's watch, right? Like, that was a way to jump forward in time. And so it was Shane really, again, studying and just like, these ideas are born in the cutting room, out of necessity, because we are in a visual medium, and having people that are so engrossed with not only just the fan favorite character stuff, but also just like the minutia of how do we get to transitions to make them better and less clunky. like this was the brilliance of it all. Like, and it's what we really kind of focused on, because there were lots of times where scenes would be super long. And then when you watch them and you cut them singularly as dailies, a scene's great. And then you put it in the movie and you're like, no, we got that whole first half has to come out, or the whole back end needs to come out, because it's not going to flow into the next scene. And yes, you may have to kill some jokes here and some babies over here, but it's for the greater good. And that's kind of where we ended up, right? We cut all these scenes and we put it together. And before we showed anyone, it was me and Shane going, we got to just start doing some stuff that makes it flow a little bit better.
And you can't do that. You can't do that without safety in that room between Dean and I first, and then, Shawn and Ryan to go, hey, here's an idea, and it's not a threat, and it's not a like insecurity. It's just like, oh my God, it's Shawn being like, oh, that really helps me, and that's a great idea. How about we do this and this to it? And so it always made you feel like, great, let's just keep. A lot of those hours were diving into exploration of other ways to do things that were not originally thought of by all of us. And we clearly saw, like Dean had mentioned earlier in this, that Deadpool can just absorb as many ideas as you could throw at it. And that's a rare property, I think.
Well, Dean, you described this as a visual medium. That's certainly true. But, a big part of the fun of Deadpool are the ironic needle drops that sort of they're a joke about the scene that they're in. Again, that seems like something in a film like this where there's going to be a lot of fluidity and a lot of improv throughout. What was the process for needle drops? Because I know Ryan's been out telling a great story about working with Madonna to get her approval on something. Tell me about how you guys did the needle drops.
Well, Shawn always does a big playlist that he shares with me that he'll update constantly, and it'll automatically update again with Jen's help. He'll do a Spotify playlist that we're all attached to, and as they add new stuff, we immediately start putting into the Avid, and we can kind of have a big library to choose from. And I'll let Shane talk about how he did too. I'm notoriously horrible with music as far as like I temp stuff out, but I always go like I wear my heart on my sleeve. It's very well known. I always go for the big emotions and stuff. So I'm always going for the most sappy, kind of emotional music I can find, kind of thing. Music is definitely not a strong suit of mine. That's why we have, I work with Dan DePrimo, who's the best music editor in the world, personally, who's also a composer. So, and he really is great at all that stuff. So I let him do his job, which is finding all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that I learned more than anything from Shane is he is so amazing with music. And there were so many ideas and so many, just again, and him being a fan and just so music centric, he had so many great ideas that I would have never come up with. Like never in a million years, I would have gone the safe, easy route, right? And he would always come up with these like crazy ass ideas, and some worked and some didn't. But at the same time, it was the fact that we were just trying stuff, and it's weird. Like on Stranger Things, the big joke on Stranger Things is, can we get one cue, like even a score piece, that the Duffers won't change? And our success rate is probably 0%. Okay. And so the fact that Shane actually had probably an 80% hit rate on the stuff that he was coming up with or suggesting was amazing. And yeah, so there's a lot of experimentation there, but at the same time, it was a lot of Shane and Ryan and Shawn pitching ideas, and just it's trial and error.
Yeah, and that's very nice of you, Dean. Thank you. I think that, listen, Ryan is super savvy with music and has lots of great ideas. Madonna being at the very early stages of anything. And I remember the playlist he sent me. He's like, this playlist is insane. And I was like, no, it's perfect. And I made an equally insane playlist that, you just start to like listen. Here's the truth is, like, I cut ads for 10 years and I climbed up quite a bit in that world. And I don't want to knock people in advertising, but like, in the feature world, there's a script and there's a director and there's a real point of view. And a lot of times you're shooting that script and you're putting it on and you may be doing this to enhance it. In the commercial world, a lot of times it falls on the editors at a breakneck pace to invent almost the story and find the music and sound design it. And you have 2 days before you're showing a director or the head of the ad agency or all the creatives. And so after 10 years of refining that every 2 weeks, having to just trust my gut and finding the 10 years of practice of finding images that marry with music, which is very difficult to do, but you can feel it when the two things work. All those tools found their way into Deadpool, and I knew going into it that it was the perfect thing for me to jump into, because I knew that the soundtrack would be big. I knew it would be ironic. I knew it would be full of references that I understood and could bring my lens to. And I knew that Ryan shared similar sensibilities because of the music choices in the first few films. So that was a dream. And yeah, I remember Rhett Reese telling me, one of the writers telling me that if you feel your music, make it through to the end and hit that screen, it's one of the best feelings. And I definitely had that a few times in the film, and I was really proud of some of the ones that stuck in there.
Well, there's a scene or two, time permitting, I'd like to talk to you about. Before we do, though, I should ask you the following. And that is, one of the questions people ask me to ask editors is just about their process. And that's such a big question. But if you boiled it down, it was, the process of just, how do you start building a scene? Where do you find the structure of a scene? And I can't remember who the editor was, but one told me that while they're watching dailies, they're trying to figure out how the blocking was designed by the director. And then they separate the scene into different segments so that they can manage it on a smaller level. And that seemed to make sense. But I thought I'd hear from each of you, how do you approach just the beginning of building a scene?
I kind of approach everything, just having been with Shawn so long. I've said this many times, and when I watch his dailies, they just tell me what he wants me to do. I don't know how else to explain it. I know that he wants to start here and end here, and I know he wants to go into coverage on these lines, and so I kind of just, as I'm watching dailies, I build it in my brain, and I start selecting the pieces and performances that I think are spectacular, and sometimes I'll just build a whole scene around a line or a joke. But then there's also sometimes I'll build a performance, or I'll build a whole scene around, looks and stuff. It's also, I know exactly what perspective he wants to tell the story from. And so that really helps a lot. And that's probably the most challenging thing, is to figure out what perspective, whose perspective are we telling the story from in this scene. And once you can do that, then everything else kind of just falls into place. You service that storyline, and it can change, and sometimes it often does. But I think as far as a starting point, you read the script, you go, okay, this scene is about this, and then you build it around that. And if you can't understand what it is about, then that's where it gets to where you're like, I can see the frustration of people going, I don't know where he wants to go. There's so much footage and there's so much stuff. And what I try to do is not get overwhelmed with the footage. I cut the most simple version of it, and then look at all the rest of the footage and go, how can I enhance what I have? And I think it's like building a house. You want to have a strong foundation, and then everything else is just bonus, right? Then you can populate with the walls and the textures and all that kind of stuff, and add the finishings later. And so that's kind of how I approach building anything that Shawn shoots. But again, I just know how he's going to shoot stuff, and so when I watch it, I'm like, okay, this is where he wants to start, and this is how we're going to end.
The first film I cut was this documentary called One More Time with Feeling that Andrew Dominic directed, and it was about Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds recording their studio album after the death of Nick's son. And it was it was a very unconventional documentary. It was shot in black and white 3D, and it was about navigating, like it was shot only over like 10 days, and it was about navigating the space in which these people are moving. It was a much more freeform edit in the way that we would sort of cut things narratively, where you just had a guy in a studio and a band in a studio, and that was just the day. And then you would cut these very poetic pieces. And I think there was something about that being my first experience with long form, where I go more into the dailies, and I have like I just tap my mark. I keep my finger like a pulse on making markers on them, and I just, like a litmus test, I just kind of respond to the things that I think are really exciting or engaging for me, and then I kind of build everything around that. I tend to drop those things in first, and that experience on that first film just freed me up to say, like, even if this is the intention, the energy is different now with this person in that frame. Everything's changed, and so I have to be the first person to engage with it as someone who is on the other side of that lens for the first time, or outside of that creation for the first time. And I'm not always right, but I do think a lot of times, like, if you're pulling out the things that you're feeling, you can sort of map the geography of everything out around it. And then I think within there you find the intention of the scene, whether or not it's meant to be funny or dramatic or internalized. That, I think that's where you find those little bits of tissue. A great moment in that was just selecting Hugh acting drunk in the hero hideout, and just letting Hugh was just like riffing on, being belligerent and walking around and talking to shadows and, mumbling to Deadpool. And so, I would go through there and just be like, that's funny, and that's funny, and that's weird, and that's different. And then when I built the scene, it's like, oh, well, these little pieces of Wolverine, let's work the dialogue around him spitting his whiskey up and throwing a bottle on the ground and, acting like a maniac. And it made it more, I think it brings another layer to it.
At any point after you were considered done on the film, did you have to revisit it for any reason? Last minute changes, QC work? Is it that unusual for a film like this for you to be working on it right up until, a week to go before it comes out?
Yeah, I mean, we were still, we were still dropping in shots at the very last second. We had in the 30 something years I've been doing this, this is the tightest post schedule I've ever had in my life. We had 23 weeks to deliver 2,000 digital shots, and cut it and have it scored and sounded, and without our team, we would not have made it. Without the support of Marvel, we would not have made it. I mean, they were behind us 100%. They trusted us 100%. This wasn't a typical Marvel movie, where in the big things where they there's a lot of reshoots that happen. We didn't have any of that stuff. We delivered the movie, but at the end of the day, like, at the very end, there was a couple pieces that Shawn and Ryan wanted to grab, and so we went out into a backyard and shot some stuff, and dropped it in at the last second. Very, very minor stuff, nothing that would have, made or break it, but just stuff that they were really kind of passionate and wanted to put in. No, this was definitely, and we were working 7 days a week forever. I mean, it was to the point where, every 21 days they'd be like, you got to take a day off. And we're like, well, we can't. We had to, and it was one of those things where we were the cutting room was open all the time, and because it had to be, we were doing 4 and 5 hour visual effects reviews because we just had to get notes in and out and done, and we were dealing with 2 different coasts and sometimes 3 with Ryan because he was in Budapest, and or in somewhere else in the world, and so it was a constant ebb and flow of managing time and resources, and making sure that every department had enough of both, from the key people that we needed to get the answers done, and then you bring in the Marvel side of it, and Kevin Feige, who is, I mean, what a dream. Like,
Yeah.
like he's like the sweetest, most lovely person, and someone that really loves Post and understands it and respects it. And it was, talk about a breath of fresh air. It was, he just wanted the things to get better. I mean, he threw a Hail Mary at the last minute where, the I call it the spaghettification, right? The spaghetti that comes out of the walls at the end, when Cassandra's trying to eliminate the timelines, to like harken back to a Loki, a disintegration of timelines and stuff. Um, that was a concept that no one, we didn't even have it until literally like 2 or 3 weeks before the movie was released. We didn't even know if the vendors could do it. And they're like, we can, but it has to be on these exact shots. There's no extensions. There's no changing. This is it. And like, but it was one of those things where it's like, that's what made it. Like, and it's all those thousands of decisions that we made every single day that unified this whole movie, and what made it so special. And there was never a time where anyone was made to feel like we weren't on something very special.
Well, you said Kevin Feige loves Post. How about Ryan Reynolds? I mean, one of the things I remember
Loves.
from Deadpool 2 was these great pictures he took with Dirk Westervelt and Craig Alpert, editors of Deadpool 2, where
Yeah.
he's in full Deadpool costume sitting with him in front of the Avid. What was he like in the cutting room?
On set. I mean, we would be on set every day, with a laptop showing him and Sean Cutts in a tent, freezing our butt off in London. Um, with his, either he has the Deadpool hat on or off, or he's in the prosthetic makeup. I mean, uh, we kind of did it all. We had to get to that level where we were showing him stuff the day they shot Monday. They saw a cut Tuesday afternoon at lunch. We were on set showing him, getting notes, doing those notes, making sure that we didn't need anything else, because we were building and striking sets faster than anyone could imagine. And we had to, because the one thing, and we haven't talked about this, but we should, is the one thing that we really enjoyed, not enjoyed, the when the strikes happened, we were able to work through the writer strike, so we were still shooting because we had a locked script. When the actors went on strike, we had to stop. But when we stopped, we actually didn't stop. We went to New York and edited. We had about half the movie shot, and we had about an hour's worth of cut material that we just fine tuned and massaged to no end. And then we brought in Kevin Feige and Lou and Wendy. We showed them what we had. We had, but what that yielded was ideas to either enhance, reshoot, go back and get something else, and go, we don't need this, and this. So in that amount of time, we couldn't write anything, right? But we came up with some ideas of like what we could do. And so once the gears started turning again and the strike ended, as soon as we could, we immediately hired writers, and we were rewriting, and Shawn and Ryan were rewriting as we were shooting. And so every day the production would have to come, like, wait, we're doing what? And we're going to build this, and this, and this. And so the communication between production and post was so seamless and so like intertwined. It was literally like this massive integrated editorial. We definitely were the hub, and we were feeding everyone what they needed because we were the only ones that knew what was going to be happening, because it was all kind of changing. And so everyone was running and gunning, and we were just kind of right in the forefront of it all. So it was definitely a very unique experience to be out there. George Cottle, so lovely and such an amazing talent, really embraced having us around, let us be around and give some input. And because Shawn and Ryan were so trusting of me and Shane, um, most of the time one of us was out on second unit because we were shooting second unit forever. The whole fight at Cassandra's with our legacy heroes, on the page we shot it. It was supposed to be a 3 or 4 day shoot. They did it. We put it together. Wasn't big enough. After everything that we had gone through and everything we'd done, what we planned for wasn't good enough in the scope of the movie. So what did we do? We asked production, we need to keep that set up. We need to keep the extras here and doubles. We need to go shoot some second unit. And we shot for 2 weeks out there. And we made this sequence so massive. We shot too much, obviously. You let an editor out there and we're going to shoot the moon. And we did. And it was literally like, how can we make this better? What is the craziest thing you can think of? Let's do it. Like, how big can that explosion be? Let's do it. Like, and so to run and gun like that was so awesome. But what it did yield was these huge epic sequences. And even New York Street with the Deadpool core and all that kind of stuff. It was like, let's incorporate more. Let's get more. And it all kind of ballooned. But it was all with the support of not only production, Mary McLaughlin, who without her, none of this would have happened, because she is so amazing and so incredible at her job that she had the resources to be able to give us the extra days and time to get the stuff that we really needed to make the movie as great as it is. And we couldn't have done it without Marvel supporting all of our ideas and trusting us enough to let us do what we want to do.
So there's a lot of scenes in the film that we could talk about. I got to pick one, and one that stood out to me was there's a tracking shot that Deadpool and Wolverine go into battle with a multitude of Deadpools, and it sort of tracks down this street and into a bus and through a bus and out of the bus, and that's all done as ostensibly as a oneer, although I'm sure there's a lot of hidden edits going on there. Tell me about putting that scene together.
So that was a oneer.
It was truly a oneer.
It was truly a oneer. So this is a shot that Ryan Reynolds has had in his brain for 6 years, since Deadpool 1, with the Madonna track that he wanted to come to fruition. This shot was our multi-million-dollar shot, and that's what it was. It was a multi-million-dollar shot. It was prevised, storyboarded and prevised and tech-vised to the nth degree, meaning there wasn't a single stone unturned of how to shoot this shot and how are we going to do it and all that kind of stuff. And we ended up doing it. Worked perfect. It's this motion control shot that doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And when we got it all together, and yes, there are some edits and there's a sense of like the action, right? So we had to, because it's a motion control, we shot certain parts of the action and then stitched them together. Once we did all the pieces, we put it all together. And what we realized is in the body of the movie, it was too long. Me and Shane, before all this, again, we were in all these meetings, we were kept throwing flags of like, we have zero release valve, meaning I've got nothing to cut to. There is not an extra angle. I can't get out of it. Once we're in the shot, we're in the shot till it ends. So whether that's 3.5 minutes or like we're in it, we're going to hold hands. This is what we're going to do. It was this whole thing. The audience told us, it's incredible. It's amazing. It's too long. Then what do? When we first started shooting, I think Shawn had this intuition to shoot blind owl up in a window, commenting on what was happening. Months before we did the oneer, we had that in our back pocket, and we're like, that's what we're going to use to tighten this down. We cut a minute out of that oneer.
Wow.
There was a minute of action of more Deadpools getting just slain, and we had to do it in a way, and we only could do it because we had this cutaway, and because Shawn had the foresight to do it, just because. But that sequence was incredible. I mean, it was. You want to talk about, again, it was that was so well prepped and designed that it went off without a hitch. I mean, it really did. It was one of the easiest things to put together because it was so well produced. And But again, it was one of those things where we just didn't have the flexibility to do anything but what the shot was designed to do. And then, few test screenings into it, we realized we have to do something, because it's just not, no matter how, and honestly, because that whole that whole scene is so reliant on visual effects, and it was shot so late. The reason it cost so much money is because it had so much stuff to put into it, and it was so long, to render out, a 4K file, frame by frame digital, hand animation and stuff. It's takes forever, and when it's 3.5 minutes long, it compounds everything. It would take 3-4 days just to render a shot, and if there's any glitch in there, you got to do it again. And so it was the complexity of that shot is what made it the hardest part of it all. And so getting to see versions of stuff, like we would give a whole bunch of notes, and then to see those notes, it would be, a week, 2 weeks later, and just time was not our friend, and time was definitely not on our side. And so once we decided to chop it up and make it 2 different parts, that's when we got to a spot where, okay, we can really now get granular, because it's a little less, the turnaround time was chopped by, 2/4, or 2/3. So it definitely sped it up. So we were able to get it to a spot where it looked great at the end. But no, that was definitely one of the hardest shots in the movie, for sure.
I always struggle to come up with the last question, so I apologize in advance. But for each of you, which character in the film is your co-editor most like in the cutting room? Could be anybody in the whole film. Doesn't have to be just Deadpool or Wolverine.
I think Marker's like Blade.
What, he doesn't say much?
I think he's just badass and definitive and like and aware. He's just a very he's got a very gruff and lovable demeanor about him, and it kind of goes both ways. And I think Blade, there's something about people love Blade, not just because he's acting tough. There's just something sort of special about him and accessible. And I don't know, I guess if I'm thinking of anybody, he certainly doesn't speak in a non-distinguishable French accent. So so I think it's Blade.
I would definitely say Shane is very much a Deadpool. I'll tell you why. He has this kind of this insecure confidence, where I know internally he's going like, oh my God, this sucks, but it actually doesn't, and it's really, really good. And he owns what he does, and he's very confident in what he does, and he's very passionate about what he does, and he definitely has a pulse on what's funny and what is kind of current in the zeitgeist. And again, with the music and stuff, he's got a timing that is just it's a natural inherent thing. He's born to cut comedy. He has that in his brain. And that's where Deadpool's just, he's kind of this bumbling idiot that comments on everything. And he's so insecure in the stuff that really is meaningful, whatever, but he's confident in the idea that these are the most important people in his life, and he's grounded in what is actually real and important, and that's Shane. He's grounded in what's real and important, and but he can run around like this kind of chaos, and it's so great because it creates so much space to have fun. Right. And then that's what all Deadpool's doing is he's just having fun.
That's the nicest thing. This is why we all love each other, because it's the nicest thing you could ever say to anybody. Thank you. And yeah, Dean is stoic in the sense that he is the platform in which held this whole film up in the post department, and he has meaningful relationships that have lasted a long time with people, and he has no problem telling people what he needs from them, and I respect him a lot for it. And I think that he says with Jen, we didn't get this movie. We didn't get this movie there without Dean.
Well, I was sure at least one of you was going to bust out a Peter Pool, but I think those are both good answers.
You can be Peter Pool. You can be Peter Pool.
You can be Peter Paul.
I'll take it.